Gareth Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand this is a split call, or am I taking another party's call?
If that's what you want.
Sure. Well, I probably won't take a full 10 minutes, even if it's not a split call. Well, kia ora, Mr. Speaker. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Kia ora. My dad worked for the IRD for many, many years, and I don't know if anyone else has sort of had the experience where you don't really want to tell people at parties who you work for. So he'd make a joke, because he didn't really want to talk to worked for the IRD and tax people. So he'd say, oh, it's a taxing job, I don't want to tell you. And then he'd have to sort of under his breath go, I work for the IRD. And I wonder if auditors are the same, because it's not particularly, in the words of the Minister Bennett, a sexy job, but it's a critical job in our economy. And while they maybe don't get the kudos other sectors have, auditors play a critical role in the financial health of our economy. Everything from the assurity in the stock market and the key role they play there for investors, through to avoiding fraud and malpractice at some of our companies, through to the critical role they play in our parliament in advising us on the financial health of some of our state-owned enterprises. And we've also seen, as James Shaw pointed out in his contribution, when auditors have failed, we can see catastrophic consequences, as we saw with that absolutely gigantic Enron collapse in the US, which can pin to the failure of auditing requirements. So they play a critical role, and that's why we were a little bit reluctant in the first reading of this legislation, in fact voted against it, because we didn't think the case had been made for why we needed to broaden the scope for auditors and risks of a light-handed regulation approach. But we went into the select committee period with an open mind. We'd like to acknowledge the chair, thank the submitters, thank the officials. What we heard there was a unanimous support for the changes adopted. We think they're common sense changes. And in fact, things, for example, such as the merging of the New Zealand and Australasian bodies, make some sense with the two bodies supporting it. We think widening the ability of people to become auditors as long as they're accredited within a standardised approach makes sense, because ultimately auditors play a critical role in our economy. I know previous Green speakers in this series of debates on this legislation have talked about the risks of a light-handed regulatory approach. This is something we've learnt from New Zealand's history. When you look at the leaky home building fiasco and the billions of dollars of liability which have accrued to central and local government, we need to make sure that regulation is appropriate, but we can't have this approach where all regulation is bad by virtue of the fact that it is regulation. Regulation, like auditors, play a critical role in our economy, and that's why the Green Party will continue to support smart, targeted, appropriate regulation and auditing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kia ora.
Carmel Sepuloni.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
This is the balance of the split call.
Thank you for choosing me. It's good to speak on a bill that we do support. Labor does support this legislation, and we do agree with the intent of the legislation. We've heard from a broad spectrum of voices from the accountancy, audit and professional services industry, including small and regional practitioners regarding this legislation. We are aware that there are a diverse range of views on the future and the shape of the industry, not just those put forward by the Institute of Chartered Accountants and other representative bodies. And the intent of this legislation, Mr. Speaker, makes the accounting and audit industry more efficient and effective, hence why we will be supporting this legislation. We are happy about the common